need to actually intervene and say to the institutions, pay over and pay up. It's not acceptable, the current situation, but we as a government will look at all of the levers at our disposals in relation to other ways.
Talk or take action.
Well, I'd like to take action. I'd like to take action.
Because I honestly believe that what Simon is saying now sounds really radical and sounds very strong in the face of the church intransigence. But he was dragged kicking and screaming into saying that this week because of the horror of events and how the people of this country have reacted to it, and how we in the Dáil raised the question of the lack of response from the church in relation to the Woods Agreement and also in relation to this. And I am not calling for the government to disband the Bon Secours order. I'm calling for the Bon Secours order to reconsider its position. But I think that the government asking them to do the same would be hugely significant. If every party were to say to the Bon Secours order, we agree, reconsider your position in this country, you walked away with 45 million in profit in the last 10 years, hand it back to the order from the 5 or 6 hospitals that they run. So they are making money out of their legacy in this country from the time they established in 100 years ago in 1917 until now. They have made money, and I'm arguing that they made money during the course of the mother and baby legacy of Tuam. And we still have to get to the bottom of that. Okay. How many babies were trafficked, how much headage payment they received per woman and child, and how much work those women did for free for that order, and where that has led them today, so that they can pocket 45 million in profits from the hospitals over the last 10 years. The government have been slow on this, and Fianna Fáil have been appalling.
John McGuinness on this, of course, the indemnity deal that the state signed.
Micheál Lehane quotes, you see a piece by John Deasy saying that there was a clique of HSE managers covering up for each other. And if it is the instinct of the state to protect the state, then the job of politicians is to step in and say no more.
That's right.
And we do have to get to the bottom of what goes on in the HSE between various layers of management and how potentially they are covering up. Just like the Gardaí have covered up the whistleblowers case and the Garda Commission remains in place. I know people working from the HSE who are suspended without pay for long periods of time because of criticisms they make of the HSE, but management at the top remain in place despite the treatment of people like this. Now, either this government, and Simon Harris has responsibility for the portfolio, grab the HSE, pull it apart by examination.
Is it fit for purpose? Because Leo Varadkar wanted to scrap it. He said the HSE, it just doesn't work, it's not going to work, we need to get rid of it.
Well, the debate about what the best health structures in this country have been going on for such a long period of time. We now have a committee in the Oireachtas due to report in April with all party agreement in terms of the structure. I think it is important, though, to say, Breed, that a lot of the top level management that you're criticising, and you've every right to criticise people, were not the people in place when these things have happened in the southeast. And in fact, there's a number of new people. Well, there's a number of new people. Well, there's a number of new people like Cathal Morgan who have been brought in.
It seems like we're spending a fortune hiring lawyers to examine or find out what did or did not happen and come up with the answers for us many years hence. But surely there's a better way and we could fix things in real time.
Well, it's interesting that the Commission of Inquiry seem to have become the technique of rule in this country in every department. And when you say, look at the Project Eagle being investigated by the FBI in the States, by the PSNI in Northern Ireland, by the British police in Britain, but by an inquiry down here, why can we not have our police go in and investigate what's happening with Project Eagle and NAMA? Then it begs the question, do we trust our police, given all that's happened with the McCabe inquiry? We're in a bit of a bind, but I do think, and everybody out there in the street will tell you, nothing will change until somebody is made accountable, arrested, charged, put on trial and sent to prison.
But what does accountable mean? Does it mean, for instance, and what civil servant would relish the prospect of being hauled before a Dáil committee?
They wouldn't relish it.
Where maybe
but
politicians would be grandstanding.
Sometimes being hauled before the courts, and until we begin to criminally investigate some of these issues, then everybody's going to cover for everybody else.
Catherine and then John.
That's right. There should be a criminal.
Some of the women who were there in the Dáil, particularly you, Catherine, with the Taoiseach, I think, on the day. Is it a token thing? What about the other 364 days of the year? Or is International Women's Day something like quotas that we need for women to be more represented in our politics? Breeds and then Catherine.
I think International Women's Day was hugely significant this year, and if we talk about if we go back on the subjects we've just been talking about, just to put them in a context, what will not be tolerated by the next generation, which were out in the streets, there were tens of thousands of young people young men and women on the streets this week on International Women's Day. They will not tolerate this sort of cover-up of the actions of the church, and they will not tolerate the lack of freedom over their bodily autonomy. The issue of abortion and the right to choose looms large with them. So I think it's hugely significant this year in particular, but I think it is always important that issues, not just like quotas, but look at the gender pay gap reports that were given through the EU and McKinley and PricewaterhouseCoopers in the recent past. The gender pay gap has opened up under austerity up to 16%. That is outrageous. We've constantly been told that one of the reasons we joined the EU was to get rid of pay inequality. Look where we are at now, in the midst of the discussion about Brexit, etc. The question of unequal pay between men and women for the same work is right back slap on the middle of the agenda. And it's really important that young women and young men get involved in this fight for equality for women. It's incredible in the 21st century that we are
Catherine,
at this point.
briefly before we go to
Well, I think it's very important.
not.
I cannot imagine Enda Kenny of what he might say to Donald Trump. I mean, at the best of times, he can't really speak off the cuff unless he's a very prepared script that is carefully woven, like you've just carefully woven, Simon. The message has to be 50,000 undocumented Irish were undocumented under Obama. They were undocumented under the Clintons. The point about Trump is his blanket ban on people coming from Muslim countries on the day that the Taoiseach is handing him a bowl of shamrock. And that is disgusting. That is really outrageous. And I think that the Taoiseach's message should be that we have to put an end to racism and to discrimination and Islamophobia, not feed into it. And if he doesn't say that to Trump, then shame on him. It's not just about us, it's about people throughout the world.
Catherine,
and there are many people in those countries.
Sorry,
I would like to think he'd play the trump card on our behalf and do as